Good morning and happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to this session of Balance in Life, talking about boundary issues during COVID-19. I'm Crystal Tyler Mackey, welcoming you to this session on behalf of Virginia Cooperative Extension, the Human Development Program team, and NC State. We are so pleased to have our very own Dr. Kimberly Allen. I call her our very own. She's at NC State, but she's been a partner with us on this project pretty much since the beginning. So we're so excited to hear from her today. Just a quick reminder for those, when you have questions to put in the chat box, please do those, and we will get back to Q&A at the end of the session. But also be reminded, some of you have some great comments and feedback to share. When you're posting in the chat box, the default is going to have you post, and only the panelists, only us, Dr. Allen, Bethany, and myself will be able to see those. If you want everyone else who's attending to see those, you'll have to select the drop-down box in the chat that says all panelists and attendees. So a lot of times we want to share your thoughts back out to everyone else. So use that drop-down box if that's the case. Without further ado, I want to welcome and turn things over to Dr. Allen.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen and give a huge thank you to Virginia Extension for doing this amazing series and letting North Carolina State University be a part of it. I really give VCE the credit for all the hard work. So thank you, thank you. And today I'm going to be talking about boundaries and what boundaries are looking like during COVID, and maybe a little bit around best practices. So let me forward my slide here. So you guys may remember me. I did a talk with my girls a couple of weeks ago. I will still be talking about them, so kept that slide up. So I'm Kim, and Sophia and Fiona are my Fona. She calls herself Fona, but Fiona is her name, and myself, Sophia. But so I'll be talking a little bit about them. I'm in North Carolina, as Crystal said, and I am a human development specialist there, and I also teach in our academic program. And so, of course, I think about families, I talk about families, and I will be talking about my family and how all of this COVID-related boundaries and the new movement back into regular schedules and how we're setting boundaries around the changes that are happening. So we'll be talking a little bit about all things boundaries this morning. At the end, I'm going to give you guys a chance to, if somebody is brave and wants to talk about boundaries that you are dealing with, we'll kind of look at a scenario if that sort of seems to be something that we want to do, and think about how to make decisions around boundaries. So when we think about boundaries, what is about, like we hear it all the time, you've got to set boundaries, set better boundaries. Oh, you don't have boundaries. So we talk about it, but what is it and how is it different than rules, and why do some of us have so many obstacles in the way when it comes to setting boundaries? And so if you kind of boil it down to what boundaries are, it's really determining and acting on the behaviors that we will accept from the people around us. So what behaviors will I tolerate? What behaviors do I accept? What behaviors are help me thrive? And it's setting those boundaries. Many of us, I think the research shows, particularly those of us who are women, tend to be the caretakers and absorb everybody's emotions and needs, and sometimes setting boundaries for ourselves can be a really big challenge. So we'll delve into that a little bit more. And the other thing about boundaries to remember is that sometimes we don't even know what our boundaries are until they've been crossed. It was like, why am I so upset about that? What is it that makes me so upset? And I don't know about you, but this is happening in COVID when I'm seeing for example, my darling niece, who is the best first grade teacher, and I love her so much. And at the end of the school year, she ran around and hugged, she went to each of her students' houses and gave them a hug for the summer. And they're in Missouri, and the COVID rates in their little town are very low. But I'm in a state where at the time we were at a stay-home order, and I'm thinking, why is this making me so upset? Why am I feeling like a boundary has been crossed? Well, I know that she's going to my parents' house the next day, and my dad is 81 and has a lot of health issues. And so that boundary, it's not my boundary to create, but I'm like processing all this. And we all are, like, even with our own decisions, are we going out? Are we staying in? For our family members who have to go out, what are our boundaries? And the point is, boundaries are what help us feel safe. Boundaries are what help children feel secure and loved, and it relieves their anxiety. So creating boundaries is a big, important part of how we have healthy relationships, how we get through crisis times like pandemics, but also in normal like everyday life. Creating boundaries, that's what keeps our relationships healthy, helps us get our own needs met. We've all heard the put your own mask on first. It's not necessarily all of our training to do that or our nature to do that, but if we are not setting the boundaries that help us be the best we can be, then sometimes that spills over into negative relationship behaviors. Okay, so what are some examples of setting boundaries in COVID? I'm getting really specific to COVID here. So, and I'll talk about some of the ways to structure or how to set boundaries around structure in a little bit. But we all know reducing screen time, reducing access to news or media, that has been shown to be a way to relieve some anxiety. So let's turn off the news. I'm choosing not to engage in COVID-related media after 6 p.m. I personally know that if I'm on media, which I don't always follow this rule, but if I'm on media after 9 or 10 p.m., that anxiety goes up. It's much harder for me to go to sleep. Here's another example. Perhaps someone in your house wants to go out and meet with friends. They're teenagers. They're young people. Even if they're other adults in your house, we're social beings. We want to get out. So I understand that your friends are all meeting at the park, but you may not go with them until I have time to do some research and make an informed decision. So that's not saying yes or no. It's saying I have to look into this and make an informed decision. Maybe I need to talk to other parents. Maybe I need to look at some guidelines that we see. So that's just another example of setting a boundary. This is a good one. How many people are like, this is me. Like, I'm constantly telling my mom and my niece about, going around and hugging children. And my niece could have said, well, thank you for sharing. I prefer to do my own research around COVID and make my own decisions about how to do it. Again, that's setting a boundary. And the whole, I feel like there's these two worlds of most of the people I know who are still working, who are still very productive. And then every once in a while I see more on social media. I'm so bored. I'm ready for this to end because I'm so bored. I can't relate to the I'm so bored part. But for someone who maybe does need to take a break, it's a lot. If you're trying to work and manage your family and manage this pandemic and make sense, I'm glad you're getting so much done. I'm just going to focus on rest right now. That's a boundary. That's that self-care. I need to take a break. For example, in real life today, this afternoon, I'm taking the afternoon off. I've been go, 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 go. I need a break. So this afternoon, I'm taking the afternoon off. And then finally, I've said this in my house. We're not going to attend events until I feel ready to engage in public places. I don't know when that's going to be or what that's going to look like, but that's my boundary. So when I talk about boundaries related to COVID, these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. How do we prepare to re-enter, or for those of us who have um, had the opportunity to stay in place and not be out in public, how do we start making decisions about when to do that and under what circumstances do we do that with the least amount of anxiety? And I think many of us are probably exploring how, what are the next steps in this pandemic of moving into a different pattern. Okay, so why do we even need boundaries at all? So for this, if you guys want to, I'm just going to ask you to brainstorm for a second in text chat. I have 2 or 3 questions that I'll pose to you. But my question to you is, why do you think we need boundaries? Why is it important for you to have boundaries? So you can either respond to the panelists and attendees and everybody can see, or you can just submit to the panelists and I'll read what you all are saying. But why do we need boundaries? Why do you in particularly need boundaries? To feel safer. Yeah, because like I said, it really can feel overwhelming and unsafe to be out, to have a peace of mind, and to feel safe. Absolutely. So a lot around safety, less stress in our lives, to be the best version of myself for both my family and my colleagues, to keep focus and to recharge. It tells us how to navigate how we treat people and share how we feel. You're right, Terry. It's all about sort of letting people know our expectations and honoring their it's a two-way street. Boundaries are a two-way street for sure. Otherwise they can get violated. Exactly. And to reduce anxiety and feel safe. Exactly. So we're all in this together. Boundaries help us with that balance. Crystal has set up a whole series on how to find that balance. And this whole COVID re-entry, this new COVID life is so new and it's scary. And these boundaries can help us reduce that stress. Okay, so my next question is, in what ways are you keeping good boundaries right now? Can anyone give an example of a boundary? Some of us try to use common sense in determining when and where to go based on the information that we have knowledge about. That keeps you safe and mindful. Absolutely. Great point, William. Aaron says, setting realistic goals and timelines for work. Absolutely. The idea of we are in a pandemic trying to work. We have to be realistic about what it is that we can and can't accomplish. So setting those realistic goals and timelines. Elizabeth is doing great at keeping the boundaries around her time. Terry is doing the boundaries of finding that time to get away, get out in nature, get away from the news. Great. Setting boundaries if there's someone that maybe you're not agreeing with on how to handle. I talked about that with my life. Yeah, if you're not agreeing on that, finding a boundary, setting maybe less communication, or having that topic off limits for until you can come to, yeah. Okay, some people are saying I'm limiting people who come into my home. All my work is in one place. My kids and husband know to stay out of that space. Oh, so you're really setting a physical boundary about your workspace. Okay. Setting a schedule for eating at home, deciding how, oh, great. These, and you all, I think can kind of get a theme going here. You can see the theme, but communicating about the space between work and family. Valerie logs off at 5 p.m. ensuring that you're not available at that time. I've seen some funny memes where it says like, here's my work schedule, 9 to 9:10, 9:45 to 9:50, 11 to 11:05. Like they're just like peeking in and getting the moments they can. It's just sometimes hard to create those boundaries, but it's you're constantly on when you're doing that. So, all right. What about boundaries that you're struggling with? And I found a couple of examples from memes like, how many of you guys have said, stop, we can't go to the emergency room right now, to behave yourself, or, you know, have your kids run by behind you during the middle of a call with your boss. Sometimes our boundaries are not as good. And I'll talk a little bit more about boundaries around screen time at my house. That's a boundary we've struggled with way before COVID, but even more during COVID. So what about you guys? What are you struggling with? What are the boundaries that are a little trickier for you? Deciding how much to help to provide to a family member. Yeah. Stopping working from home when I'm here all the time. It's like I'm constantly working because I have all the resources here. So balancing that, I'm at home trying to work, but I'm also at home and it's my family life. Yeah, it makes sense. Keeping family out of the work area. Yeah, that's a challenge for sure. As you're thinking about those boundaries that you're struggling maybe a little bit with, there are some best practices for creating boundaries. So I think these are also very similar to what we would see as healthy relationship skills and parenting best practices. I like to say relationship skills are relationship skills, and since creating boundaries is a relationship skill, these are going to be kind of familiar. But the first best practice is that we focus on feelings, that we recognize that everyone that we're engaging with, that we're having a relationship with, has their own feeling, their own perceptions, their own ideas. So we want to focus on this. And I used to have I statements down there, but the feelings that are coming out of this boundary, I need this to feel safe. So we're focusing on the feelings. We're also communicating clearly. It's really easy to be passive aggressive, especially because sometimes we don't know our boundaries are conflicted until they've already happened. Remember, sometimes we don't know. So then we're like, what's going on? So if we can communicate that clearly, that also helps. And I think this is true of all relationships, but probably even more true with children. It's really outlining our expectations and if there are consequences of those expectations. So this is my workspace. It's my expectation that you will not be in my workspace. If you come in my workspace, it's going to make me feel angry. That's going to be the consequence. I'm going to feel angry. And if you keep doing it, we might have to, do some more consequences. Yeah. Yeah, struggling with others' lack of boundaries. And sometimes if those others are not people, like they're strangers at the grocery store, you can't, like it's a little trickier. It's these tips are for people you're in a relationship with. You can't be like, let's sit down and have a conversation with the masses who are showing up at the swimming pool, right? Another part of setting boundaries is taking responsibility for the things that we do. So I'm going to do my best to XYZ. Here's what I need from you to also XYZ. Consistent and kind and firm, those really also come from that parenting best practice, but consistency and having that communication that is kind but firm. And the firm is that part of the firm is the boundary making that reduces the anxiety in children. And offer empathy and using those I statements. So I feel really frustrated when you go outside and you don't wear your mask. I feel worried about your safety. So those I messages. So this is sort of what we want to think about. And you're right, with kids, consistency is key for sure. Okay, so this is not a new slide. This is what I did an anxiety reduction talk. I talked about these, but these are all boundaries. These are all like, let's have a boundary around when we go to sleep and what our school schedule is. Although now we're having a whole, in our house, how about you guys, a whole new discussion. School is ending and now it's summer. What does that schedule look like now that there's not school? So renegotiating schedules is a big thing here. Making sure we're getting exercising, that we're all contributing to the household chores, that we're having fun time. Playtime is really important. Screen time and getting out in nature. These are additional structures that the research show is really important. I thought this was funny, like the homeschool schedule was like some practical life skills. Intro to toilet flushing, turn off the light switch, how to stop making unnecessary noises. That was just a fun thing I saw about scheduling. And then there's the whole the limit screen time. That's an area in our house. Okay, we're cutting it way back. Today it's 10 hours max. Literally 10 hours. I'm so embarrassed. I'm turning red. Screen time it's a mess at my house. Got to figure out better boundaries. And just an example of scheduling. So in our house, when we had school, this is what the schedule looked like. School's been out at our house for the last week, 2 weeks probably. And now I'm just like, you guys have to be up by 11 o'clock. Just get up. Go to bed at a decent time. So our schedule has gone from pretty and fancy and organized to like chaos and let me just write something on the board. So the last thing I want to do then is give you guys a chance. We'll talk through if you have a scenario. So here's an example. Last night was my book club that I'm a part of was our first face-to-face, and I had to set some boundaries with the people I went to book club with around. I did not share any food or beverage. I asked that we be outside. I sat far away from everybody. I was trying really hard to create the boundaries that help me feel safe. Another thing we're dealing with at our house is my daughter wants to go to the thrift store so bad. She hasn't really done much shopping and she's just so excited to get out of the house. But I don't want to talk more about my family. I want to see what you guys, so what are the scenarios that you're having to figure out a boundary that might be a challenge for you? Or this is also could be a time where we talk about additional times when you've had to create a boundary, and if it was successful, you could also share that. So does anybody want to put your scenario, what you're trying to work on in your house or in your work situation around boundaries? I have told my daughter at this point I don't feel comfortable with her going to a thrift store, but at some point I'm going to have to deal with it. I don't know. So setting up that my spouse is extroverted, setting up boundaries on when we can talk home related issues, and he's ready to talk at length, and I need a break to recharge. Oh, yep, there you go. That's a conversation you have to have about when I'm gonna do what. Yeah. Another one of you says church. Am I going? I'm guessing that the choice is, am I going to church? Am I going to a live face-to-face church event, or not yet? Yeah, a lot of people in my niece, my mom, that's sort of something they've had to navigate as well. All right, well, if anybody else has another one, car church. Yeah, so a boundary for Mary might be, we have church, but we do it from our car. Yeah. Oh, here we go. We're talking about summer employment for our kids. So Tracy's trying to figure out, is it safe for my kid to go to work? What are the boundaries around summer employment? Catherine is dealing with, is it safe to eat inside a restaurant? Yeah. Can I keep my mask on in church that long? Can I breathe? I had my mask on at book club last night, and I, like, after like 30 minutes, I was like, all right, no one come near me. I couldn't breathe. I had to take my mask on. Yeah. My son is 2. He needs interaction. So we go see his grandparents, and I have to harp on maintaining social distances and not being in his face. Some of my parents' work is healthcare and with the public. So setting those boundaries with your parents and their grandchild. Yep. Right. Going to the local community pool. Uh-huh. Yeah, because pools in North Carolina were granted permission, and many of them opened this week. Yep. Right. So we're all, I guess the point of this is to show there's no easy answer. We're all dealing with boundary issues. So if we remember these best practices as we're talking to our kids about, are you going to get a summer job? As we're figuring out with our partners, I need some time at the end of the day to decompress because I'm an introvert and I need to get my energy back. Or church is really important to me, but I'm not ready to be in service, so I need to do it from my car. So we just remember some of these best practices, then hopefully that helps a little bit. This is another repeat slide from my first presentation, but just as a reminder, boundaries are one part of anxiety reduction, but there's many other things we can also be focusing on. So if you are noticing that anxiety is high in your house, there's that other webinar that is recorded that you could go back, and we went through all of these best practices as well. And just to kind of end with this idea that boundaries are really about helping us build connections. The more we can create those boundaries in a kind and loving but firm way that makes our needs met while also honoring the needs of our family members and our friends, that's building those connections. And those connections are the difference between a happy, healthy life and not. So not always easy. Like sometimes they're really hard conversations to have, but if we can sort of navigate this re-entry into, a COVID world, it's going to require some setting of boundaries for sure. Okay, we have about 2 minutes. If anybody has any questions, this would be the time for questions, and I can turn it back over to you, Crystal, if you want to say farewell.
Sure, and certainly if you have, 1 or 2 questions to pop into the chat, we'll see if we can get one out to Dr. Allen. Thank you for this information and reminder. Sometimes it's a reminder of things that we know, but we need to be reminded to do. I see some things coming into the chat, and one thing I might pull out, Dr. Allen, if you're willing to touch this one. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. I'm divorced, and ex has visitation, refuses to isolate or wear a mask, says they're doing those things, but photos show parties and beaches without a mask. So you had talked earlier, I know, about the things we can control and those we can't. So if you want to maybe take that one on.
Yeah, well, what I will say is this isn't the first time I've heard this. This is the 3rd or 4th family that I've heard from where the parent values are pretty different around COVID related issues. And so know you're not alone, and I'm sure it feels like life or death. Like this is very serious stuff. So it, kind of going back to those best practices and what Crystal says, there's some things we can control, some things we cannot. Oh, my timer's going off. I must be done. But know that you're not alone, and the more you can talk from a place of this is about our children's safety and well-being. Let's put the children first and in the front, first and foremost. Okay, let's make their protections the best, and then you got to do what you got to do. Your family best. So I wish you lots of good will as you navigate that complex situation.
Right. Thank you so much for being on, Dr. Allen. It's always so good to have you on. We could keep going, but we're going to honor our ending time here and thank everyone for joining us. We have this session coming up next Friday. We'll be talking about home safety and keeping safe at home. And Dr. Allen and her team at NC State has got us connected with what we have heard is the top housing specialist in the country, right? So we are excited to bring her on with us talking about keeping safe at home. In the meantime, you'll get an email for this recording as well as an Ask the Expert session on family finance. There was a lot of questions from last week's session around family financial management, and so Dr. Travis Mountain is going to come back on with us on Wednesday and do that session. So you'll receive that invitation by email as well. In closing, I just want to thank everyone again for being here. You can find all of the previous recordings on our Virginia Cooperative Extension website. There's also a YouTube playlist. I'll include that link in the email that goes out, and would appreciate feedback for us on the survey. It helps us keep talking about things that you want us to talk about. So at this point, I'm going to wish everyone a happy Friday. Dr. Allen, I'm glad you're taking the afternoon off to relax and establish that boundary. I hope others do the same. Thanks again, all. Have a great day.